untold, the empire that lost control. Dark skyline. The camera glides over Manhattan, glowing towers reflected in shattered glass. Sirens echo in the distance. A single dollar bill drifts across Wall Street's empty street. The empire didn't collapse from the outside. It began to erode from within. The system America built, free markets, endless credit, and global trade, has turned against its own creator. What was once a symbol of strength now chains the nation to debt, inflation, and political dysfunction. For millions of Americans, the dream feels broken. Prices rise, wages stagnate, and faith in the system fades. The richest grow richer, the rest fall behind. The numbers may still say growth, but the people feel decline. It's a paradox of power. How can a nation that controls the world's reserve currency struggle to control its own economy? How did the engine of capitalism lose the very steering wheel that guided it? Because when the world runs on your money, losing control isn't just an economic problem. It's the beginning of an identity crisis, the foundation of power, made in America. The screen flashes with the sound of roaring machines. Sparks fly. A factory whistle blows over sunrise. Detroit hums, metal, sweat, and hope filling the air. The 1950s. The world rebuilt, and America supplied the parts. From cars to steel, from radios to rockets, every product stamped, made in the USA, carried not just craftsmanship, but dominance. America wasn't just producing goods, it was producing power. Factories in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Chicago were temples of modern capitalism. Every turn of a wrench, every spark of steel fueled global growth. Europe and Japan rose again, financed by American loans, powered by American industry. The U.S. was the world's factory, the world's lender, and the world's banker, all at once. For ordinary Americans, this was more than prosperity, it was pride. A single income bought a home, a car, and a future. The worker wasn't just part of the economy, they were the economy. Rising tension. And at the center of it all, the dollar. Backed by gold, trusted by every nation, it became the heartbeat of global trade. Oil, food, machines, everything was priced in dollars. The world depended on U.S. production, and that dependence cemented America's control. But power built on production demands constant strength. Factories running, workers thriving, exports growing. The system was balanced on industrial muscle. And in that moment of triumph, no one imagined it could fade. Because when a nation becomes the foundation of the world's economy, even the smallest cracks can shake the entire world. The great shift from production to speculation. A conveyor belt grinds to a halt. Silence. The camera pans over an abandoned factory, broken windows, rusted metal, and a for sale sign fluttering in the wind. Cut to Wall Street. Phones ringing, screens flashing, money moving at the speed of light. The 1970s marked a turning point. The machines that once built America began to fall silent. Global competition grew. Japan made better cars, Europe made cheaper steel, and American factories started to vanish. The world no longer came to the U.S. for products. It came for profits. In the void left by manufacturing, something new rose: finance. Wall Street became the new factory, and its product wasn't cars or steel, it was money itself. Paper replaced production. Investment replaced invention. The real economy, where people built, created, and worked, was quietly overtaken by a world of speculation. For millions of workers, the American dream began to fade. The towns that once thrived on industry turned into the Rust Belt, hollowed out reminders of lost greatness. The same hands that built the nation were left with nothing to build. Intensifies. The U.S. stopped producing wealth and started trading it. Profit came not from making things, but from moving numbers from the stock ticker to the trading floor. Skyscrapers rose over the ruins of factories. The heartbeat of America shifted from Detroit's assembly lines to Wall Street's flashing screens. And with that shift, the country's identity changed forever. The world's most powerful economy had transformed, from a maker of goods to a manager of money. Outsourcing America, the profit trap. The camera glides over a cargo ship stacked high with containers, made in China, made in Vietnam. Waves crash against its hull as it sails toward the glowing skyline of Los Angeles. Cut to silent American factories, empty parking lots, dust-covered machines. In the 1990s, a quiet revolution reshaped the American economy. Corporations discovered a new formula: build abroad, profit at home. Cheap labor in Asia promised endless margins, and Wall Street rewarded every cut, every closure, every efficiency. Production fled to China, Mexico, and beyond, not because America couldn't make things, but because it chose not to. Factories that once roared with life now stood silent. The same towns that fueled post-war prosperity became ghostly reminders of a system chasing profit over purpose. For corporations, it was victory, record profits, rising stocks, smiling CEOs. For workers, it was exile from their own economy. Millions watched their jobs shipped overseas, their pride replaced by pink slips. The country that once built the world now bought from it. Deepening tension. America's wealth shifted from production to consumption, from making to buying. The U.S. became hooked on imports it once dominated: electronics, steel, even medicine. Each container that arrived strengthened another nation's industry and weakened America's control over its own future. The profit trap was set. Corporations gained in the short term, but the nation lost in the long run. The economy no longer belonged to the factory floor. It belonged to the global supply chain. Because when a country trades independence for profit, it may find that the price of efficiency is control itself. China rises, the new master of production. A vast factory floor hums under fluorescent lights. Robotic arms move in perfect rhythm, assembling phones, cars, and chips. Outside, cargo cranes lift endless containers marked "Made in China." The sound of industry fills the air, relentless, mechanical, unstoppable. China watched, learned, and adapted. It studied America's capitalism, the efficiency, the innovation, the ambition, and then rebuilt it on a scale the world had never seen. By the 2000s, what America once invented, China was now producing. Every iPhone assembled in Shenzhen, every car part stamped in Guangzhou, every chip fabricated abroad. Each one quietly shifted power away from the United States. Factories that once stood in Michigan now stood in Shanghai. America designed, China delivered. The balance of global trade began to tilt, and soon, the world's production engine had a new operator. For American workers, the shift was personal. Their jobs became someone else's miracle. Their decline built another nation's rise. With rising tension, China's growth wasn't rebellion against capitalism. It was mastery of it. Backed by low costs, high discipline, and state strategy, China turned foreign investment into national strength. Each American dollar spent on imports fueled Beijing's industrial empire. The two economies became inseparable, but not equal. America consumed, China created. Because when one nation makes what another nation buys, control slowly changes hands. Not through war, but through trade. The debt economy, borrowing control. A digital clock ticks upward, trillions flashing faster and faster. The hum of printing presses fills the room as sheets of fresh dollars roll out. Cut to Capitol Hill, heated debates, papers flying, faces weary with denial. When production faltered and profits slowed, America found a new way to sustain its power: borrowing. To keep the dream alive, it replaced creation with credit. From households to the government, debt became the fuel of the modern U.S. economy. Every crisis, every war, every bailout, financed not by savings, but by promises of tomorrow. By the 1980s, deficits were no longer shameful, they were policy. Politicians promised prosperity without sacrifice, and the printing press became the most powerful machine in Washington. The dollar, once backed by gold, was now backed by confidence and debt. For the average American, the illusion was comforting but cruel. Homes, cars, and education were bought on credit, lifestyles funded by loans. The nation was living well, but living borrowed. Tone sharpens. Then came the wars in the Middle East, the financial crash, and the rescues of the very banks that caused it. Trillions poured out, each dollar borrowed from a future that seemed less certain. The United States, once the world's greatest lender, quietly became its greatest debtor. Nations like China began financing America's deficits, the empire of credit replacing the empire of production. The more it borrowed, the less it controlled. Debt had become both the lifeline and the leash. Because when a nation must borrow to survive, it no longer owns its power. It rents it to the money machine, printing the illusion. A dimly lit conference room. The seal of the Federal Reserve glows under soft light. Hands shuffle papers. Cameras flash. Outside, protests, rising prices, and screens blinking red. The hum of printers fades into the sound of digital money counters clicking endlessly. There was a time when the U.S. government controlled money. But today, that power belongs elsewhere, inside the marble walls of the Federal Reserve. What began as a stabilizer has become the most powerful institution in America, the unseen engine keeping the economy alive. When crisis strikes, whether 2008 or 2020, the Fed's answer is always the same: print more. Trillions created from nothing, injected into markets, into banks, into the bloodstream of a fragile economy. Stocks soar, debts expand, and the illusion of prosperity returns. For ordinary Americans, it feels like a trick they can't escape. Their wages stay still while prices climb. Groceries cost more, rent rises, and savings shrink. Yet they're told the system is stable. Stability bought with invisible money. Tone deepens. Each crisis solved by printing doesn't fix the problem. It multiplies it. The more dollars created, the less each one is worth. Inflation eats quietly, at paychecks, at pensions, at futures. The same machine that once defended America's economy now feeds its addiction. The Fed became not just the lender of last resort, but the ruler of last resort. Every solution bought time, but sold control. Because when money can be created endlessly, power shifts silently, from the people who earn it to the institution that prints it. Inflation, the price of losing control. A grocery store scanner beeps. A mother checks her receipt. Confusion turns to disbelief. Gas pumps flash record prices. A child's lunchbox closes, half full. The camera cuts to red inflation charts climbing like wildfire. Inflation, the silent thief. It doesn't storm the gates. It seeps into every home, every wallet, every choice. The cost of food, rent, fuel, and healthcare rises faster than paychecks can catch up. What used to fill a shopping cart now barely fills a basket. Each year, the dollar, once the world's symbol of strength, buys a little less. The problem isn't random. It's structural. Years of easy money, debt-fueled growth, and money printing have turned prices into pressure. What was meant to stimulate the economy now suffocates it. The system feeds on itself. Borrowing creates inflation, and inflation demands more borrowing to survive. For millions of Americans, it's not theory, it's survival. Families skip meals, delay bills, and work longer hours just to afford what once was normal. This strong economy they hear about on TV doesn't match the reality at the checkout counter. Tone darkens. As inflation climbs, confidence falls. People lose faith, not just in money, but in the promise that hard work equals reward. The very foundation of the American dream begins to crack. And as the government borrows more to pay for the rising cost of its own promises, the debt deepens, fueling the very fire it claims to fight. Because when money loses meaning, control is already gone. Global backfire, the dollar's rebellion. A spinning globe made of dollar bills slowly cracks apart. Cut to world leaders shaking hands at BRICS summits, flags of China, Russia, and India glowing under spotlights. Digital currency symbols pulse across a dark map, a new system quietly awakening. For decades, America's greatest export wasn't cars, weapons, or technology. It was the dollar. The U.S. used its currency as a tool of power, a global weapon disguised as finance. Every trade, every loan, every barrel of oil flowed through the green paper stamp with Washington's face. The world obeyed because it had no choice. The dollar was the lifeblood of global trade. But power, when overused, breeds resistance. Sanctions, financial wars, and economic dominance pushed nations to the edge. Countries like Russia, China, and Brazil began to ask the forbidden question: what if the world didn't need the dollar anymore? For Americans, the idea feels unthinkable. The dollar isn't just money. It's identity, pride, and power. But beyond U.S. borders, the world is quietly building alternatives. Rising tension. BRICS nations are uniting their currencies. Oil trades once priced only in dollars are now settled in yuan. Central banks are stockpiling gold. Digital currencies, fast, borderless, and beyond Washington's control, threaten to rewrite the rules of money itself. The empire that once ruled through its currency now faces a rebellion born from its own creation. The dollar's dominance made America powerful, but its overreach made others desperate to escape. Foreign ownership. America for sale. The camera sweeps over endless farmland under a golden sunset. The scene fades, a for sale sign creaks in the wind. Cut to aerial drone shots of suburban neighborhoods, luxury skyscrapers, and city blocks, quietly marked by foreign flags overlaid on the map. Once, America owned the world. Now, the world owns pieces of America. Over the past few decades, foreign nations, from China and Japan to Saudi Arabia, have quietly bought more than just U.S. products. They've bought America itself. Farmland, factories, real estate, and even debt, all traded away in the name of globalization and profit. The same dollars that once financed foreign growth have come home as foreign ownership. Investors bought U.S. Treasury bonds to fund its deficits, corporations to access its markets, and land to secure its food. America's open economy. For many Americans, it feels like losing home ground. Because when a nation sells what makes it strong, its sovereignty isn't taken. It's traded away. Because when control becomes coercion, the world eventually fights back, not with armies, but with economics. Technology. Innovation without control. A glowing circuit board fades into a Silicon Valley skyline. Inside a lab, engineers design sleek devices, typing lines of code illuminated by blue light. Cut to massive factories in Taiwan and South Korea. Robotic arms assembling the very machines America imagined. Innovation, once America's proudest weapon. From a microchip to the internet, the United States led the technological revolution. But as its creativity soared, its control slipped. Silicon Valley became the brain of the digital age. Yet the hands that built its creations moved overseas. America designs the future, but doesn't manufacture it. The world's most valuable companies rely on foreign factories, foreign minerals, and foreign labor. Apple's products are born in California, but assembled in China. Advanced chips that power AI, defense, and communication come from Taiwan, a nation America doesn't even control. For the American worker, technology became both promise and betrayal. The new economy rewarded coders, not builders. The towns that once made cars and steel never learned to make microchips. Progress left them behind, tone sharpens. This dependency isn't just economic, it's strategic. A single disruption in Asia could freeze entire American industries. The nation that invented the semiconductor can't even produce enough of it. Its software runs the world, but its hardware is made elsewhere. The result: innovation without independence. America's tech empire floats on foundations it doesn't own. Because when creation depends on someone else's production, brilliance turns into vulnerability. Political division. The system at war with itself. A gavel slams. The camera pans across Congress. Lawmakers shouting, fingers pointing. Protesters chant outside the Capitol as news headlines flash. Government shutdown, debt ceiling crisis, parties clash over budget. The flag behind the podium waves under harsh light, torn between two sides. Once politics was about vision, now it's about vengeance. The United States, built on debate and compromise, has become paralyzed by division. Left and right no longer argue about how to fix the economy. They argue about who to blame for breaking it. Every crisis turns into a battlefield. Every solution dies in the crossfire. In the halls of power, reform has become impossible. Debt ceilings rise like clockwork. Shutdowns loom like routine. While the economy sinks under its own weight, leaders fight over optics and ideology, not survival. For everyday Americans, it feels like being trapped in a house where the roof is burning, but the occupants are still arguing about who started the fire. Tone tightens. Each election deepens the fracture. One side promises spending, the other demands cuts. Neither delivers control. The nation that once set the world's economic rules can't even agree on its own budget. The markets watch nervously as political dysfunction becomes the new normal, and confidence erodes with every televised shouting match. The greatest danger to America's economy may not come from abroad, but from within. Because a divided house can't defend its foundation, and when politics becomes war, governance becomes surrender, the lost generation, Millennials and Gen Z, pay the price. A gray morning light cuts through a small apartment window. A young worker scrolls through job listings. Another checks rent prices. Her face falls. Overlapping voices echo. Loan payment due, rent increase notice, insufficient funds. For the first time in modern history, the next generation is poorer than the one before. Millennials and Gen Z were promised opportunity, but inherited debt. From student loans to medical bills, from overpriced rent to stagnant wages. The cost of living has outpaced the dream of living. Decades of economic imbalance have built a wall between youth and stability. The same system that once rewarded effort now punishes aspiration. College degrees, once tickets to the middle class, now come with lifelong debt and no guarantee of security. For millions, the American dream has become a cruel mirage, visible but forever out of reach. Tone sharpens. Homeownership, once the symbol of success, is now a luxury. In cities across America, rents consume entire paychecks. The average young adult cannot afford the house their parents bought decades ago at a fraction of today's price. Healthcare drains savings. Inflation erases progress. The result? A generation working harder but falling further behind, forced to rent, to delay families, to give up futures. The foundation that sustained American power, a strong, confident middle class, is cracking. Because when a generation loses faith in the system begins to lose control at the reckoning, America's economic breaking point. Dark clouds roll over the Capitol. Thunder rumbles. The American flag flutters violently in the wind as the sound of distant sirens fades into a deep orchestral hum. The numbers no longer lie. America's national debt has climbed past the point of reason, a weight so massive that every new dollar printed only deepens the hole. The nation that once financed the world now struggles to finance itself. Rising interest rates, collapsing trust, and political paralysis, all converging toward a single, unavoidable conclusion. The reckoning isn't coming from abroad. It's coming from within. Every crisis that was solved with borrowed money has returned with interest. The economy, once the engine of global dominance, now runs on fumes, powered by illusion and delay. For ordinary Americans, it's not just numbers on a chart. It's higher prices, fewer opportunities, and a quiet fear of what happens when the system finally breaks. Tone deepens. The dollar's dominance, once unquestioned, now faces revolt. Nations are moving away, from BRICS alliances to digital currencies, signaling a world ready to move past American control. As confidence fades, markets tremble. The illusion of endless power is cracking. Washington debates. Wall Street hopes. But the storm has already formed, swelling from decades of denial and debt. This is not the fall of an empire in a single moment. It's the slow, grinding collapse of faith itself. And when a nation loses control of its own economy, it doesn't just lose wealth, it loses direction identity, and the trust that once held everything together. Conclusion. The final question. The screen fades to black. A faint heartbeat echoes. Slowly, the U.S. flag ripples in fading light, its colors muted, its stars dissolving into the glow of a digital world map. America built the greatest economy the world had ever seen, an empire of innovation, credit, and confidence. But somewhere along the way, the empire lost control. Power didn't vanish overnight. It leaked away, decision by decision, crisis by crisis, until the system that once led the world became enslaved to its own design. The dollar became both America's weapon and its weakness. The Federal Reserve, its engine of control, turned into the machine that feeds its dependency. Foreign powers grew stronger, debts grew deeper, and unity fractured into chaos. Tone lowers. The world is moving toward multipolar power, toward new currencies, toward new systems of control. And America stands at the edge, watching a system it created evolve without it. The silence lingers, heavy, uncertain, and real, because the final question remains unanswered. Pause. Can America still lead, or will it become a follower in the system it once ruled?